Welcome back to Bitcoin Season 2. I'm Charlie Spears with Blockspace Media. Bitcoin Season 2 is an era of new ideas on the oldest blockchain. It's the technical and the cultural smash together. We feature new voices, new ideas, new topics. Bitcoin Season 2 is produced by Blockspace Media, an independent B2B Bitcoin media company focused on the business of Bitcoin. Make sure to check out our other shows. The Gwart Show, my personal favorite, and the Mining Pod. Hit us on our website, blockspace.media, and subscribe to our newsletter. Also, anywhere podcasts are shown, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, you can find our content there. Again, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Mondays and Fridays, we hit Bitcoin mining mergers, ordinals, Bitcoin technical discussion, soft fork proposals. We cover it all back to back in a short 5 to 10 minute read every Monday and Friday. I'm joined today by Tyler Whittle and the pseudonymous Rijndael of the Taproot Wizards. We want to talk about the process of creating the CatVM white paper, or whatever the new term for this monstrosity construction they've created. It created a lot of buzz this past week. So I'm going to bring them up here. Tyler and Rijndael, welcome to Bitcoin Season 2.
Hey, great to be here,
Charlie.
Yeah, so I feel like you guys have really been leaning into your roles at Taproot Wizards. You wear multiple, we might say, wizard hats. You kind of act as like technical research and comms and execute the projects. So to steal a line from Office Space, what would you say you guys actually do here at Taproot Wizards?
Tyler, you want to go first?
Sure. I would say I'm a sorcerer at Taproot Wizards. I think that's the most pithy way to describe it. By and large, though, I would say I work a lot on our products, and I think the fun thing about being at Taproot Wizards is our products span everything from super technical things like CatVM to producing a children's book that we can release to our community that hopefully explains that concept. And so what I really enjoy is getting to be really deep in the weeds one day, chatting with Rijndael about what is the construction of the system, how is it actually going to work at a script level, and then also pop up and work with our community, work on designing books like this, design the missions that we're doing. And so it's really, I cannot imagine a better job to have.
How about you, Rijndael? Your title is CTO, I believe, but what do you think of your role as?
Yeah, it's that's the official title. On Twitter, I write Artificer, which is like a old school ordinals title. It used to be higher used in the protocol, but fewer people use that now. It's like a wizard term for somebody that imbues items with magic, which I think describes what I try to do. So I kind of bounce between leading the technical execution of the products and services that we're building here at Taproot Wizards, and then also doing a lot of work on research and development for future products and services. We kind of do a mix of kind of pure R&D trying to push Bitcoin forward, but something that I think separates us from a lot of other organizations in Bitcoin that do a lot of research is that we're doing it all in service of building products that we actually want our customers to use. And so we're much more kind of practically oriented than I think a lot of other research organizations in Bitcoin. And I try to lead the technical vision and execution of those two bodies of work.
And a personal observation, both of those are actually classes in Dungeons and Dragons, both Sorcerer and Artificer. So I feel that a Taproot Wizards D&D group is right around the corner.
I'm an avid fantasy connoisseur, Charlie.
I can't believe you're just leaking alpha on this pod right now, Charlie. I can't believe you're
I know Casey actually has been trying dungeon mastering. So if we need another demon scare to sweep through the Bitcoin narrative, we can have our we can recreate the 80s D&D.
Yeah, it's great to see that there's a little bit of satanic panic coming into the Bitcoin Season 2 conversation. We could definitely use more of it.
Yeah. It's only serves the wizard angle better.
That's right.
So okay, so you guys released this CatVM. I'm going to use the term white paper until you correct me. What's the difference between?
I'm going to say children's
book. A white paper.
Gotcha. Children's book. Like, what's the difference between a traditional white paper and this children's book, which we call CatVM There and Back Again? What are the material besides the like very obvious surface level stuff? What's different about this than a traditional white paper?
I think one of the things we really tried to do in producing this children's book is give a lot of the motivation behind why CatVM is needed. And so in a traditional white paper, I think what you would see is, one, it would be white and very boring, black and white. And two, there would be a very quick motivation, and then it very quickly dive into the technical details of how this thing works. And I think we wanted to flip that script a little bit and say, we kind of like, we get the technical details here, but what's really important here from a higher level is for people to understand what CatVM improves upon. And so the point was to say, look, there's this history of bridges. They failed for various reasons or don't work for various reasons. CatVM will help solve that. And at a higher level, we're going to need OpCat to do that. And so I think it was really attempting to tell much more of a story, not just the story of young Rijndael, but the story of Bitcoin's history of attempting to get, off-chain, essentially. And how can we tell that story in a way that makes sense to the average reader, the average ordinals user, and then lace in some of these technical details for the people who are, wanting for that type of material.
Yeah, I think on top of that, there's a pattern that we've seen a lot with a lot of the white papers that have come out in the last couple of years, but also a lot of the protocol and technical designs that have come out, where people kind of start from a position of, here's the tools that I have in the toolbox. What can I build with those? And then, now that I've built this thing, let me go and find demand for it. And I think what we're really trying to do is, kind of start with where we see the demand already and where we see demand growing in Bitcoin, and then work backwards from there and say, what are the systems that we need to build in order to meet that demand? And what's kind of the minimal set of things that we need in order to build those systems? So if you look at the structure of the CatVM children's story, it really is about, saying, all right, there's all these people that want to get off chain. They want to be able to do other capabilities, either for like richer semantics or for privacy or for cost or for whatever reason, like they want to get off chain. None of the existing solutions work. The properties of a good solution would be that, like, anybody can exit, that it's like not going to have prohibitive liquidity requirements on like the bridge operators, that it's not going to introduce like crazy risk for everybody who's using the bridge, like, etc. And then we kind of said, all right, if you wanted to build that kind of system, like, how would you do that? And our answer to that, with sort of like the minimal set of changes against the Bitcoin that we have today, is that you would enable OpCat and you would create a construction that we've taken kind of a bunch of prior art, like we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and we've combined a bunch of constructions together using OpCat, and we are going to use that in order to build a bridge that we think people actually use. And so, kind of instead of going from the kind of starting with the details and then trying to work backwards to usage, we're really trying to start with the usage, work backwards to the implementation details. And then, as Tyler said, we're trying to present that in a very accessible way that people can read it and decide whether or not they're interested in this in the first place. And then if they are excited about it, if they see the vision and the promise and they're excited by that, then they can dig into the technical details and start, really trying to reason about like how this thing is actually implemented.
Yeah, it's interesting because not a lot of similar works begin like a lot of like a white paper might say there is this problem that exists and here is a solution, whereas this children's book personalizes it and it tells the story of you, Rijndael, in fictional form.
Whoa, hold on. It's young Rijndael. That's not
Young
me.
Rijndael.
Completely different.
Young
person.
Rijndael.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Okay. It's young. It's an alternative young Rijndael in a fantasy world. And you desire to get off chain and you explore the various options that we have and the pitfalls or lack of success or traction they've had. So I kind of want to pull back and let's start with the process of you guys building this. I think this is one of my favorite conversations to like how did you guys come up with the idea? How do you deliver this children's book to the world? Tyler, you also brought some visual demonstrations. So how did this begin?
Yeah, so it began with us waking up one morning. Rijndael has come up with this amazing breakthrough, which is CatVM. And we're thinking about how to present it to the world. And we get on our daily call, and Udi is like, I had a dream last night. And in my dream, we wrote a children's book for this. And immediately all of us were like, yes, this is absolutely the way to present this. It's just very on brand for us. It's very fun. And it will help us tell the story, which we actually think is a very important story. So what happened is all of us kind of went into our little caves and worked on various storylines. And I want to share some of our early concept art with you today because I think it will be quite fun. So
Yeah,
let me
throw
pull
it up
that
there.
up. All right. So this mess of things that we'll kind of poke around shows you how we got into this story. So I'll zoom in here because this was the first instantiation of this story. And when we came up with this you might notice some similarities to Bipland in my terrible drawings.
Yeah, we have the same artist as Bipland here too.
I know. I'm sad that my little wizard never made it into either of those. But what you can see here is what we realized is the thing we're trying to tell is the story of getting on chain to this off chain, to layer 2 roll up, whatever you want to term this thing. There are things we want to do with Bitcoin that we can't do today, and we are going to have to go off chain to get there. And so we went through and did some initial illustrations of kind of, okay, what have we tried so far? We've tried Lightning. I think Lightning has been promised for 7 years, and it hasn't really reached its potential. And so, I was like, what should this be? Well, it's the Lightning Wastelands, right? It's this thing. It was supposed to be off chain. Technically it is off chain, but really you can't do anything you want to do there, and it doesn't work how you want it to work. Then I was like, okay, what is a multi-sig bridge? Well, we all know about like the wormhole hacks and things like that, and the perils of multi-sig bridges. And so it felt only right that a multi-sig bridge was somehow collapsing, or you're getting sucked into a black hole or something like that in the middle of it. And then I think BitVM has been the most recent thing that for the past 6 months has really captured the imagination and hearts of our builders here. But the more we looked into that, the more we were just like, this seems like it's cool in concept, but it's always just going to be imaginary. It's never going to work in the real world. And so you can see it's supported by these pre-signed Bitcoin transactions. For anyone from the Midwest, here's a guy who's asking you to hold his PSBT, which was supposed to be like a Pabst Blue Ribbon. So I think, our goal is to illustrate these as like fun and whimsical things that were happening. And then, down here, here's young Rijndael, and he's discovered the CatVM bridge. It goes all the way across. It's very colorful. It's exciting. And as you can see, it's supported by a Merkle tree of cats. And so what we really wanted to do was bake into these illustrations, some truth about these systems, right? It's not just supposed to be, if you really look at the drawings aren't just, fun and whimsical, but they actually do tell a story of what these various systems do and how they are designed. And so that's really was how we got started with this concept of, off-chain and chain and bridging and all of that stuff.
Yeah, so I kind of want to go through, because I think you spend a very appropriate amount of time introducing and walking page by page through the popular known techniques for accomplishing the off-chain bridge. And one of the first things you do, if I can share my screen, and if you're listening to this on Spotify, definitely check out the YouTube. But you introduce this idea of a bridge, and young Rijndael begins his journey in the multi-sig Madlands, and it's chaotic, and you have the risk of the bridge collapsing. And so you introduce this concept that we have to bridge in some capacity to another chain. And you introduce multi-sig, pre-signed transactions, Lightning, before you get into the cat. Can you just talk through just why the Bitcoin bridging landscape does rely on the infamous multi-sig setup here?
Yeah, so the way that Bitcoin works right now is so Bitcoin has a scripting system. Like when you make a Bitcoin transaction, if I go to send some Bitcoin to Charlie, I'm actually kind of sending my Bitcoin to a little program that he has the ability to satisfy. So if you imagine Charlie has like a 2 of 3 multisig, like what that actually means is the address for his coins are a little program that says, here's 3 public keys. If you show up with 2 signatures for them, then you can spend these coins. And there's like a couple different, mechanisms that we can put in those scripts. So we can do signature checks. We can do what are called hash locks, where it's like, here's the hash of a value. If you show up and the pre-image to that hash, then you can spend these coins. So you can do signature checks, you can do hash locks, you can do time locks. So, you can only spend this coin after some period of time has elapsed. And that's kind of it. Like you can combine those things together. You can do some basic arithmetic and a little bit of logic. But in general, you can put locks or conditions on your coins about who can spend them and when they can spend them. But you can't really put any conditions on where your coins can be spent or sort of like how they can be spent. And so if you want to build a mechanism where I lock up some coins in a bridge or an address, which is really what this is. I send my coins to some address, and then I get my coins on another blockchain or a side chain or some payments layer or some like smart contract, eCash mint or whatever. And I, send those coins around, and then they're Tyler's coins now, and he goes to withdraw them. There's no way for the layer 1 Bitcoin nodes to be able to validate those transfers off chain. Like there's no way for the layer 1 Bitcoin node to know that Tyler is actually allowed to withdraw these coins. So the way that we solve that problem today is either we have effectively a big multisig. So I send my coins to this multisig, and then the operators of that multisig run some special software to validate the transfer rules of whatever this off-chain execution environment is. And then when Tyler goes to withdraw his coins, they validate like, yep, he's allowed to do this, and they just sign a transaction that sends the coins to Tyler. So we're just like asking, some group of people or companies to just, enforce validity checks for us and then just sign transactions. That's like one approach. And then the other approach, which I think you're going to get to in a minute, which is what happens with Lightning or BitVM or other constructs, is we basically pre-sign a bunch of transactions ahead of time and then store these pre-signed transactions and broadcast them in the future if a certain set of conditions are met. So it's kind of like we game out all the possible places that we think these coins should go in the future, collaboratively sign those transactions ahead of time, and then one party can broadcast the transaction in the future. And the real challenge there is you have like a finite and known set of destinations for your coins ahead of time, which ends up leading to like liquidity issues. And it means that setup for this bridge ends up being very interactive because like everybody who has the keys has to trade around these pre-signed transactions ahead of time. And so those characteristics mean that while these systems might work for something like a payment channel, it makes it really, really challenging to build like arbitrary bridges that don't have some trade-off around either like liquidity or liveness or safety or something else.
Yeah, and you let's go back to this idea of Lightning, because I think page 4 of the storybook does summarize pretty succinctly like that the Lightning bridge, these hash locks, they do create a very strong mechanism to move off chain, but it's a bridge to nowhere, as we describe. Or maybe that's doing it a bit dirty, but you gotta capture this idea in a children's book that's compelling to the reader. And for whatever reason, Lightning is not delivered the user traction demand that I think maybe a couple years ago a lot of people thought it would be. Could you talk a little bit about just the thought process behind how we what Lightning might be? Does this bridge to nowhere always lead to nowhere, or where does that fit into the CatVM story?
Yeah, I think Lightning is it's an incredibly useful system, and it's technically like very impressive. I think the challenge here, and we're trying to make a book that's accessible and kind of punchy and entertaining and kind of like gets the point across in a very succinct way. But I think like the kind of point behind the messaging around Lightning is there was this idea that was really popular for a while. I think it's still popular, that we like anything you would ever need to do, you can do on Lightning. So if you want to do smart contracts, like just do them on Lightning. If you want to do like multi-party lending systems, like you should build that on Lightning. Like anything that you can't do on layer 1 Bitcoin because it's too expensive or it's too slow or it's not expressive enough or whatever, like just do it on Lightning. And Lightning is a really, really good system if you have participants who are online and they're willing to provision liquidity between each other, and you want them to be able to do like fast, low cost payments between one another. Lightning is a really amazing system. And the fact that you can like route Lightning payments across a bunch of those channels is like really cool. But, it's hard to do non-custodial Lightning on end user devices, both because currently Lightning requires a recipient to be online in order to receive a payment. So if you want to do like a non-custodial Lightning phone wallet, then you've got to like keep your phone out and awake when you're receiving a payment. there's a bunch of people working on things to do like offline Lightning receive, but that puts more onus on having like a really capable Lightning service provider that handles that interactivity for you. And then there's also just a lot of like liquidity and cost of capital issues that come with Lightning, because in order to set up a Lightning channel, you have to lock up funds in order to send and receive payment. And so if you want people to be able to just like quickly onboard to a system and start doing activity with it, that gets really difficult in like high fee environments or when the cost of capital starts going up. I think it's also something where we don't really know how to do like multi-party Lightning in a safe and scalable way yet. And so, Lightning is kind of useful and good at a certain set of things that it's really, really good at, but it's not the case that Lightning's going to be a panacea for all L2s to do everything that they need to do. And that's kind of the point that we were trying to get across, where, this is not going to be the bridge to everything off chain.
Yeah. If I were to summarize it briefly, I'd say Lightning's promise was payments for Bitcoin. And I think what we've seen over the past 6-7 years is that payments for Bitcoin is not a high demand use case as of today. And so while Lightning gets you off chain, unfortunately, payments for Bitcoin is just not a use case that is demanded in the real world right now. And so, had that been the case when Lightning was released, I think we would see potentially a lot more Lightning adoption, and we would have worked through some of these technical issues and a lot of the other things. But by and large, Lightning offers payments, and as far as we've seen today, payments are not the thing people want to do with Bitcoin by and large.
And payments have their own challenges and pitfalls and perhaps ceilings to like how feasible we can scale these payments with Lightning. And then the last, before we get to young Rijndael disillusioned, wandering into the Merkle forest, we have the L2 village propelled and attracting venture capital, and can be a bit of a Rube Goldberg machine. Now, I know you guys this has been its own narrative the past few weeks, but just kind of describe to me some of the challenges we face with new proposals, or the uncertainty that things like BitVM bring. Like it itself may not be this panacea or solution to creating these strong, compelling, robust bridges.
Yeah, I think BitVM is a really cool design. It's just a cool thing. I don't want to call it a bridge because it's not, it is a design of a system. And what BitVM does is it lets you encumber coins to some arbitrary computation that can be resolved on Bitcoin. And that's really neat. Like, that is something we did not think we could do before. And when Robin put out this phenomenal paper, it became clear that, you could do this, starting by building a program from NAND gates on Bitcoin and up to where we are today. But BitVM faces the same issue that Rijndael talked about with Lightning, of these liquidity requirements in a slightly different way, in that if you want to use BitVM to get off-chain to, if you want to use it as a bridge, then the way it works is that you have to rely on bridge operators fronting your payment off. If you want to go back from the off-chain to Bitcoin, you have to rely on bridge operators fronting your payment. And then only after they've done that can they go back to the BitVM bridge and say, hey, look, I've made all the payments that were requested. I would like to take the money out of the bridge I'm owed now. And I think this is totally fine in small use cases, but if you want to design a second layer that is to scale Bitcoin, you ideally want to see a lot of volume going into that. You want to see a lot of use going into that. And the larger these BitVM bridges get, the higher the capital requirements are, essentially, to safely operate these things. So, if we had a bridge the size of Arbitrum with $17 billion locked in it, and people wanted to take $1 billion out, the bridge operator is required to first go and find a credit line for $1 billion, make all of those payments, and only after they've done that can they go back to the actual bridge contract and say, I'd like to take my funds out of the bridge now. Look, I've made all the payments. And so at the end of the day, I think BitVM is a very cool construct, but unfortunately it doesn't really solve getting mass user adoption off chain.
And so here is young Rijndael fearing that the citizens of the Isle of Chain will never safely reach off chain. He's explored all that the Isle of Chain has to offer, and he grows weary from his journey, and he spies and takes refuge in the Myrtle Tree Forest. And the story does a kind of a switch up, and it becomes and introduces a quantum cat. So talk me through. I mean, you could either explain what a Myrtle Tree or how you chose to introduce this concept, or where does young Rijndael go from here?
Rijndael, do you want to talk about your journey through the not your journey, young?
It's not me. It's young Rijndael.
It's not you. It's young Rijndael.
Yeah.
It's
so
like if my name were Charlie and his name were Charlie, we would not be the same person.
Yeah, you guys are like, not all Charlies are the same person. So so Myrtle trees are an incredibly useful data structure in blockchain systems. They're used all over the place in kind of cryptocurrency systems. The idea is that you can have a single hash, so like a 32-byte hash that commits to a set of items. And then later on, you can show up with one of those items and this thing called either a Merkle inclusion proof or Merkle authentication path. And it proves that that item was included in the set that you previously committed to. So this is used all over the place. So for example, in a Bitcoin block header, one of the items, one of the fields in there is like a Merkle commitment to all the transactions in the block. And so that commits to all the transactions that were confirmed in that block. Given, one transaction, you can prove that the proof of work from that block header covers it. And if anybody kind of like changes the set of transactions, it breaks the Merkle proof. So these things are used all over the place because you can, provide a little bit of data that lets you prove in the future that one of many, many items were included there. And if we have opcat, we can actually validate Merkle proofs in Bitcoin scripts. So going back to what we were talking about earlier, where you can do kind of hash locks and signature checks and time locks, we would also be able to say, all right, when I put my coins into this UTXO or into this script, I'm committing to some set of items. And then later on at spend time, I have to show up with one of those items and prove that it's like one of the ones in the original set. That's like just a generically useful construct in Bitcoin. Later on, we use it to build up CatVM. And so we needed to introduce this idea in like a fun and whimsical way. And so the way that we did that is we have the protagonist, young Rijndael, like work his way through this complicated forest, and the cat shows him this path. And then later on, he gets to remember like, oh, the cat taught me that. And the path through the Merkle forest leads him to this library. And then in the library, he finds some wisdom from some previous sorcerers or previous wizards.
An archmage.
Yeah, so the first one is Archmage Polstra. This is a nod to Andrew Polstra, who's the head of research at Blockstream. He put out a blog post, or a couple blog posts a couple of years ago called Cat and Schnorr Tricks. And this was this really brilliant observation that if you pick particular values for the public key and the public nonce commitment in a Schnorr signature, then the value of your Schnorr signature is kind of the hash of a bunch of parts of your transaction plus the number 1. And so what that lets you do is it lets you, if you have opcat and if you have Schnorr signatures, then it lets you get parts of the transaction onto the stack. And then you can use Bitcoin script to make assertions about it. So earlier I was saying you can really only do like hash locks, time locks, and signature checks. If you have opcat and you have Schnorr signatures, then by building this special signature, you can now like look at the outputs of your transaction. You can look at where the money's going, how many destinations there are, what those destination addresses are, where the money came from. You get a lot more visibility into the transaction, and you can start making assertions over it.
And you embed, you put a sneaky little link to the Taproot Wizards GitHub in here, describing just a prototype that I believe old Rijndael built, which prototypes a vault using Cat.
Yeah. So this was a really nice. I think it's nice. It's a nice prototype of a vault. So a vault is this construction where you put some coins into this like vault UTXO, and then when you want to spend them, you don't just send them to their final destination. Instead, you have to go through this like unvaulting step where you say, all right, I want to send, I've got 10 Bitcoin in this UTXO. I want to send 1 Bitcoin to Charlie. I don't just send them immediately to Charlie. Instead, I start this like pending withdrawal step, and my coins have to sit there for like a week. And then after a week, they can go to Charlie. And the idea is that in the happy path, it kind of takes, a week or a month or whatever you program your coins to be withdrawn from the vault. But imagine somebody gets my keys and they try to unvault my coins. I might get a push notification on my phone that says, hey, your coins are being unvaulted. And I say, no, that wasn't me. And I go and I can push a button and it'll kind of cancel the withdrawal by sending my coins either back to the vault or to a new set of keys, or a different set of keys. So, a lot of custodial exchanges will support address whitelisting, where you say like, these are the places that I want my coins to go when I withdraw them. And if I want to send my coins anywhere else, it takes, 7 days to add a new address. You can do that today if you have like a trusted custodial exchange, but it'd be really great to be able to have that kind of logic enforced by Bitcoin nodes. So a vault is a way using covenants to, build that kind of construction where you have reactive security, where if somebody tries to steal your money, you can react after the fact and actually get it back. And that concept of, I've got my coins and I can kind of optimistically withdraw them. And then if it's an invalid withdrawal, then there's a way of challenging that and kind of canceling it is actually really similar to what we want in a bridge. What we would love to be able to do in a bridge is say, all right, we've got my coins bridged to this, payment system or this smart contract system or this auction house or whatever. And when I'm withdrawing coins back across the bridge, if I'm being honest, then that just works. But if I'm trying to steal somebody else's coins, then there's a way for them to cancel that and keep me from taking the money.
So young Rijndael in the library, working his way through the books of spells, sees Archmage Polstra. Then he finds Ep8, a spell by Salvatore. And I know you just kind of already touched on this, Rijndael, but that leads us into the actual proposal for CatVM here on page 11, where you can start actually constructing these permissionless bridges. Can you talk me through what CatVM actually is, again, here in the kind of like revelatory moment for young Rijndael?
Yeah, so there's this idea called MAT, which is kind of the intellectual precursor to both CatVM and BitVM. And it's this idea that you can take an arbitrary off-chain program and encumber Bitcoin like the result of that program, right? So it has this kind of optimistic withdrawal path where you say, my coins can only be withdrawn if the result of this like off-chain program is valid. And in the happy path, you just take the coins out, but there's kind of a holding period, and anybody can show up during that holding period and say, no, the result of this off-chain program is invalid, so you shouldn't take these coins. That's kind of the same shape as the vault that we just talked about, right? But the difference is, instead of just saying, no, I don't want my money to leave, you say, no, here's a fraud proof that you're not allowed to take those coins. And so Matt was this idea of how you can build that kind of behavior using Cat plus another covenant called check contract verify. And the revelation that young Rijndael has here in the library deep in the Merkle forest is that the cat and schnorr tricks and the Merkle path verification that he learned from the quantum cat, that these two things on their own are powerful enough to build this whole MAT mechanism. So if you combine these three ideas, what you have is a generic mechanism where you can say, I want to send my coins to an address that in order for them to be withdrawn, they have to go through this kind of time delayed holding period. And during that holding period, somebody can show up, and if they can, put me through this challenge response game where we adjudicate whether or not this arbitrary off-chain computation was valid. And if I lose, then the coins kind of go back to where they were. And if I win, then I get to take the coins. And that mechanism is, powerful enough and expressive enough for us to start building bridges to off-chain systems, whether those are other blockchains or side chains or things that we haven't thought of yet, where you can have like arbitrary expressiveness in those systems and still have a safe way for people to get their coins back onto layer 1 Bitcoin, and do it in a way where you're not trusting like a centralized bridge operator to provide liquidity. You're not trusting a bunch of multi-sig custodians to like honestly sign for a thing. And you don't have the kind of complexity and issues that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and we get to then my favorite page of the whole book, which is...
It's the best page.
It's the best page. And in particular, shout out to Teresa Lieb for the art, because I think this is one of the more hopeful pages I've ever seen, and one of the more exciting ones, complete with the rainbow price chart in the background. And I see a lot of the characters here crossing the Merkle tree bridge, and they're talking about things which excite me and kind of remind me even of a lot of the old like Bitcoin experimentation that I knew and grew to love early on. And you introduce some of these words which I don't really hear many Bitcoiners talking about, such as snarks or plasma cash, or even just this idea of trustlessly swapping coins. Like, there's always been a trustful component of that in Bitcoin. And I was going to kind of ask you guys, like, do you have, what is your favorite, may I say, pet unlock that Cat could enable?
Oh, man. I think snarks would be just really, really cool if we could do snarks or starks on Bitcoin. But I think for the ordinals crowd, I think one of the coolest things is this idea of trustlessly swapping coins. So I think there's a lot of issues in ordinals today with the user experience, like just bringing it back up to that level that people don't like. For instance, a lot of people don't enjoy that if they buy something on Magic Eden, that there's 10 minutes during which anyone could snipe their ordinal out of the mempool and pay a higher fee and run off with it. Or that if we do an auction today, you either have some type of trusted mechanism where you have to pre-deposit things in a certain address, or you have to do a descending price auction. And so I'm excited to see what we can do to just improve the overall Ordinals user experience with something like CatVM, where we can have Magic Eden build their marketplace on top of this. And when you click the buy button, it's yours. You don't have to worry about who's going to pay a higher fee in the middle, where artists can come and say, I want to auction off my work, and here's an ascending price auction. Pay in what you're willing to pay, and at the end we distribute all the coins back to everyone who didn't win, and all you have to do is trust that this system works the way it's going to. And so I think those types of products and things are really exciting, and definitely things that we want to explore further with CatVM.
How about you, Rijndael? What's young Rijndael's dream unlock for CatVM here?
I think it's a couple things. So on like the L1 side, I think even without CatVM, just like the bridge constructs, or I'm sorry, the vault constructs getting really bulletproof is going to be really valuable to just like hold your Bitcoin with. On the CatVM stuff specifically, what Tyler said, I think is really interesting. I think there's like a lot of fun, valuable things that people want to be able to do with, ordinals and other kind of on Bitcoin assets that are just very difficult or hard or impossible to do today. I think that stuff's really exciting. I think also just like, as much as there's not demand for, a lot of Bitcoin payments now, it would be really nice to have a payments layer where, you install an app and you get an address and you can like post that address on Twitter, GitHub, whatever, and then turn off your phone and people could just send you money. And you don't have to worry about like liquidity or channels or your phone coming online or like any of that stuff. And you can just like receive money and it's private, right? It's like, you don't have to worry about in 15 years if some like Chainalysis breakthrough is going to uncover the linkage between all your payments. Like having just fast, cheap, offline capable, not liquidity constrained payment layer for Bitcoin, I think would just be really fantastic. I don't know when there's going to be demand for that, but having a plausible path to be able to build it at some point in the future, I think would be really exciting. And if that demand never actually materializes, those kinds of capabilities are still going to be really useful for things like ordinals trading and borrowing against your assets and doing all kinds of other financial activity on Bitcoin.
Yeah, you know what? My takeaway from this last page, which shows all the suggests and floats some of the cool things you can do with Cat, is that there is something for everyone. Whether you're the privacy as your number one goal for Bitcoin, like that's a very core component to a lot of old school and new school Bitcoin folks. To whether you're the degen who just wants to not get sniped for ordinals, or whether you're like the ETH tech head who really likes snarks. Like these are all, each of these has its own compelling unlock and use case for Cat. If I'm not mistaken, like there's still very little actual implementation of Cat to date. Like I think your prototype, Rijndael, is one of the only ones that I'm aware of. Like, do you think that that one of just the missing components here is that people just need to workshop actual like implementing Cat? Do you think there's more things to even just be discovered, like beyond simply just the theoretical that Polstra wrote? Are there maybe things that Cat that we haven't even identified, even amongst the handful of people even thinking and ideating on Cat? Is there even more to this than just the children's storybook here?
That's a good question. I think, you know, I think it's fair to say that like we've been pushing the bounds on cat research. There's, you know, some other folks that have been doing some experiments with cat in other places like on Liquid, but I think we've been really kind of pushing the envelope on cat on Bitcoin, like cat on its own without other assumptions for things that just aren't going to be on Bitcoin. I think one of the results of that research is we have a better idea of the kinds of things that cat can enable technically. Now, the thing that's like kind of always unknown is what the, you know, economic and market result of those things are going to be, right? Like, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about what are the systems that are more likely to gain traction and adoption, and what things are less likely. And, you know, that opinion is informed by watching 15 years of development on Bitcoin and like multiple years of development in other ecosystems. You know, there was a little bit of a meme for a while that if we got opcat, it would enable everything. And that's just not true. Like cat enables a very specific set of new capabilities in script. You know, what people build with those is the thing that's like exciting and where we're gonna see more development. There are some more technical directions where it would be great to see more experimentation with cat, and we're certainly leading some of that, and we would encourage other people to experiment as well. Like, you know, we talked about Merkleized lookup earlier. There's a lot of cool ideas of like, all right, what other things can we put into a Merkle tree, and how do we use that to emulate other opcodes or to like add other Bitcoin scripting capabilities. So I don't know. I guess to summarize, I'd say the future is kind of somewhere in the middle. Like it's not the case that we know everything that people are going to do with cat, but it's also not the case that cat, you know, blows open the doors to unbounded computation on layer one. It lets us encumber coins with, you know, arbitrary off-chain computation, but it doesn't like turn Bitcoin into a different system than it is today.
Yeah, so yeah, I feel that kind of that resolves the cat storybook as it is so far. How do you know, it's been a week and a half, 2 weeks I think since you guys dropped this. Like looking back, how do you think it's been received? Do you think it advanced your own story of the Taproot Wizards well? Reflections on your first storybook writing experience here.
Yeah, I think I've been really happy with how it's been perceived and received by the community. I think it's really gotten the point across that what we can do with cat is these permissionless bridges, where if you're on the L2 and you want to come back, you can do it and you're in charge of your own destiny. And I think that's just something really important for us as system designers who want to design, you know, the scaling layer that Bitcoin deserves. And I think cat is going to allow us to do just that. And so it's been really amazing to see the reception around that. I think that the technical community has been very excited as well. And I know Rijndael, I'll let him speak more to that. But it's been really good to see people who are more in the weeds technically look at our children's book and say, oh, I see what you're saying here. And actually, this gives us really cool new primitives. And so by and large, I think it's been a smashing success as far as I can tell. I look forward to getting a hard copy to distribute to my future children.
Yeah, same. I think my only regret is I wish we would put page numbers on the pages, but otherwise it's been a smashing success. I love it. We've gotten a lot of feedback from people that you know, despite us not calling this a white paper and saying over and over again that it's a children's story, a lot of people perceive this as white paper and have been telling us that this is like the first white paper that they have read in a long time and that they enjoyed reading and that they actually wanted to share with people. I think that there's you know, a lot of times when you're putting out a new idea, your goal should be to make that idea accessible and understandable to the people that you want to communicate with. And sometimes I think people spend a lot of time trying to dress up their ideas and make them like really formal because they think that's important. And at the end of the day, like the goal here is that, you know, we think that we can build really, really useful systems that people will actually use if we have OpCat, and we want as many people to understand that idea as possible. And, you know, some percentage of those people are going to be really curious about it and are going to want to dig into the details, and the details matter. But, you know, we should be making, you know, new ideas and new breakthroughs in Bitcoin as accessible to as many people as possible so that people can decide whether or not to engage with it. So yeah, I'm thrilled with the book. You know, who knows what wild and wacky new format we're going to do next, but I think it'll be a lot of fun.
And Rijndael, you know, unlike the Quantum Cats, this is a PDF, so we can in fact update that AWS pointer to one with page numbers.
That's true. Yeah, you know, it's really funny. Our production process for this was very different because, like with Quantum Cats, we had to make sure that everything was absolutely perfect before we pushed anything. And with this, it's like, oh yeah, we'll update the PDF later if we need to, which was like not a thing that we're used to at Taproot Wizards.
Well, take some of the initial unwavering execution risk off your shoulders, Rijndael. And maybe this will spawn an era where white papers aren't so stodgy and boring and uptight. Maybe we'll look back and say this is the new white paper, and perhaps we'll see non-technical artists credited on very technical white papers. That would be a really cool, very Bitcoin Season 2 thing to happen. I want to thank you guys so much, Tyler, Rijndael, and the broader Taproot Wizards team who worked on this, for joining me and explaining this arcane concept to me. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining Bitcoin Season 2. Make sure to check out Bitcoin Season 2 streamed and on podcast form wherever you listen to content. Hit up blockspace.media, our website, and subscribe to the newsletter. Thank you very much.